Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Listen to Central and Eastern Europe podcast. I'm Balázs Csekő. In today's edition, which is the premiere of a hopefully long list of episodes, we are going to talk about the current political situation in Poland, where an extremely rare ghost election took place 2 weeks ago. We are discussing the possible outcome of the election as well as its consequences for the ruling government and the opposition forces. We'll also take a closer look at the status of democracy in Warsaw. In order to do so, I proudly present my very first guest, Edith Zgut, who is a political analyst and visiting lecturer at the Center for Europe at the University of Warsaw. Hi, Edith. Thank you very much for joining this show. I'm very glad to have you here. And very briefly, just tell us where are you now and what are you doing as we are still amid the coronavirus crisis, although many restrictions have already fallen across Europe.
Thanks a lot, Balázs, and thank you for having me. Glad to be here. I'm still in Warsaw. We're doing quite fine during the lockdown, I must say. Developed some new skills and started to ride a bicycle. So these are the positive impacts on my life, that I've never been a biker, and right now I'm biking everywhere, and I think I'll keep doing that. And I can't wait to get the borders open because I terribly miss my family and friends from Budapest. So I can't wait to go back to my home city to visit everyone.
Thank you very much, Edith. Let's hope everything goes well, and within some weeks, the borders across Central Europe will be open again, as it has already been announced. But now, let me come to our main topic, to the presidential election in Poland. So, there was an election going to take place on May 10th, but it was afterwards declared invalid since there was no possibility to vote. How is it possible to have a ghost election in 2020?
So first of all, I think it's worth taking into account that this is the fourth election in a row in Poland. The political atmosphere has been extremely dangerously hot, and the pandemic crisis has just further exploited it. We still don't know when exactly will the elections take place after no voting was held on the 10th of May. And before we dive into the plausible scenarios, let me step back a bit. Because what we've been witnessing is that the Polish government has chosen not to activate the available constitutional sort of extraordinary measures during the pandemic lockdown. They did not declare state of natural disaster either, which includes an epidemic, for political considerations, because they wanted to hold elections as soon as possible. And in case of introducing these measures, that would have allowed suspending the preparations for the elections. So instead, the government has overwritten the rules by forcing first a postal vote that could have breached the constitutional principle of the universality of the elections, and also push different legislations on these presidential elections during the pandemic, aiming to change the rules to secret ballot and also to change the term of the office of the president. And in the first round, like, none of them work out as they officially or they originally planned it. And since the coalition was also almost collapsed, only 4 days before the officially announced date of the election, Jarosław Kaczynski, the leader of the ruling party, together with Jarosław Gowin, a junior coalition partner, they struck a background deal to solve a political crisis over the controversial postal vote. So Kaczynski agreed with his kind of rebel coalition partner that nothing will happen on this officially announced day. After all, they explicitly claimed that the Supreme Court will annul the elections, annul it, and then to call new elections, most likely for July or beginning of June, we'll see. But so what we've seen is that these two party leaders have openly stated what the Supreme Court would decide. And I think there are two key lessons learned here, or remain reminders, if you wish. It is that, first of all, I think what we have been seen here is it's indicative as of how deep the democratic standards have sunk in Poland. So 0 constitutional institutions were involved in this process. And although this agreement was totally unconstitutional, it was just, proven to be effective because of the complete takeover of the Supreme Court. So practically the government is violating its constitution and creating its invisible authoritarian constitution at the end of the day. The second lesson learned is that this backroom deal is ensured that the real center of power is totally elsewhere, that it is defined by the Polish constitution. So Poland has been always, since PiS came to power, a classic example of informal exercise of power. But right now, it's just like it has been unraveled that this is exactly how the country is functioning. So formal organizations and procedures of the state are not determine how decisions are made. Instead, there is a sort of a real decision-making authority, an informal practice of the ruling party, which in fact really indicates how the state organs should act. So despite the fact that Jarosław Kaczynski does not serve either a prime minister nor a president, he is de facto leader of Poland without any constitutional responsibility and horizontal accountability.
You mentioned the option of postal voting. It was on the table for several days. Basically, 4 or 5 days prior to the election, they decided not to move ahead with this option. Postal voting is something you find in many Western European democracies. Why would postal voting not work in Poland?
Well, in this particular case, the concerns raised by OSCE, EU institutions, and European Council or the Council of Europe were that, first of all, the main problem was that, according to the Polish constitution, amending the electoral rules would not be possible or shouldn't happen half a year before elections are taking place. So they were coming up with this changing very close to the originally scheduled election date. So that was one thing. The other thing was that state authorities and administration was simply not ready to organize such elections, that because of this sort of short notice. There were also other issues with regards to what exactly is going to happen to those Polish citizens who are living abroad. Right now, they're stuck in London and Germany. How the hell they will be able to reach out to their consulates to cast a ballot, or at least to organize themselves during the pandemic crisis? So there were many issues, not to mention the fact that there were also sort of concerns raised by privacy law and GDPR-related issues, what exactly is going to happen to those who are going to, how Polish citizens were sort of handled, or their information, private information will be dealt with by state authorities. So there were a lot of issues raised here. For the moment, it seems like that it's going to be a mixed package at the end. So a recently adopted bill would allow both in-person and postal voting. It's a hybrid concept, but nonetheless, this amendment is still unconstitutional. As I mentioned, that electoral law should not be amended half a year before the elections. Anyway, so these are the main concerns that we will need to focus on. But again, as I mentioned, nothing is definite yet. We still don't know when exactly will election take place, most likely end of June and beginning of July. But it's going to, this is an information that we are still waiting for, sort of.
What are the possible outcomes of the election? If you take a look at the polls, the current president, Andrzej Duda, is leading by far. But in Poland, you have 2 rounds in case none of the candidates reaches 50% of the vote in the first round. So what do you think? How much importance does the first round have in this year's election?
Well, first of all, while President Andrzej Duda, the president in office, is still way ahead of the oppositional candidates, he recently lost 10% in the last 2 weeks. So there is sort of a changing political environment. And so, for instance, if elections were held last month, he was supposed to win in the first round easily with 53% of the votes. Now it seems like that's not going to happen. But there is at least more chances that there will be a second round. And we will see who will challenge him at the end of the day, because there is a new player in the game right now, Rafał Trzaskowski, the mayor of Warsaw, who has recently replaced the candidate of the biggest oppositional party. So originally, Civic Platform was nominating Małgorzata Kidawa-Błońska, but she resigned recently after some inconsistent communications, and her numbers look really bad. She's been heavily dropping in the polls. So with Rafał Trzaskowski on board, this might be a whole new ballgame. He immediately ranked high on top right after he announced he's running for presidency last week. And although this might be sort of the result of his freshness, that he just jumped on board. We will see. But nevertheless, fear-mongering has already started from the government. So Law and Justice has started to depict Rafał Trzaskowski as a pro-LGBTQ candidate who is willing to undermine the traditional way of Polish life. So the message here is that you will need to decide whether Poland remains attached to national traditions under President Duda or moves in a very dangerous direction under Trzaskowski, who promotes LGBTQ ideas, who is a rainbow candidate. So that's the way of thinking. That's the narrative of the government. But this is a very false dichotomy, I must say. Here, the main question is if Polish people want PIS to proceed with authoritarian system transformation, or willing to elect a president that will prevent further democratic deteriorations, because the government and the center-right opposition has a markedly different vision about how constitutional design of Poland should look like. So all three main candidates, Rafał Trzaskowski, Szymon Hołownia, and Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, are center-right candidates who are fiercely criticizing the so-called good change of the government. At least this is how the government is depicting this procedure, authoritarian turn with massive judiciary overhaul. So if Duda will be replaced with any of the oppositional candidates, and I think this is the most important stake here of these elections, Poland could potentially return to a constitutional order, or at least turn back to some sort of normality. The president could not only slow down, but also prevent further system transforming efforts. So the Polish president can veto basically any decisions which could be overwritten by the Sejm, only with three-fifth majority. And PIS does not have this kind of majority. So, yeah.
You've just mentioned that there are several opposition candidates in this race. In case of a second round between the current president Duda and an oppositional candidate, do you think the opposition will be able to unite behind a single candidate?
Yeah, well, it's very difficult to say at this stage. I really hope that they will be able to maintain or come up with some sort of a smart solution, because if they are alienating their own electorate and they won't be able to sort of convince their own electorate to support that candidate that will keep standing in the second round, it's going to be extremely difficult to replace the government. So it's hard to say right now. At this moment, I see more fragmentation than sort of being united. And this could be problematic at the end of the day. So I would be very cautious to make any calls right now, because the chessboard has been like dynamically changing with this new candidate who just jumped on board, and we still don't know when the election will take place. So I guess it remains to be seen what sort of chances any of those candidates have. But you're right about saying that without sort of joint forces, some sort, or at least coming up with smart ideas, it will be very difficult to defeat Andrzej Duda.
What is your opinion? What is really at stake at this election?
So it's, let me get back to what I just mentioned about, like states when it comes to how markedly different visions these oppositional candidates are having when it comes to the constitutional design of Poland. So if, let's in theory, if Duda wins, then the road of the government to authoritarian consolidation will remain sort of, sort of undisturbed, and the party will complete sort of its state capture, like remaining, think about, these kind of pressure points, remaining part of the judiciary. Right now, this is an ongoing procedure to politically capture the Supreme Court after the Constitutional Court has been captured. Disciplinary chambers are putting lots of pressure on both on ordinary judges, on ordinary courts, and many other levels of the courts. There has been a long-standing sort of intention from the government to repolonize the media. So further media capture, Polsat News might be in danger, even maybe 24/7, TVN 24, which is right now under Discovery Channel, belonging to Discovery Channel, in sort of under American sort of protective umbrella, so to say. But the regulation of the media market via limiting foreign subsidies, I mean, that could come back on the agenda at the end of the day. Also, universities could be stripped of independence further. So we could see that academic independence might be restricted. There are already rumors that the independence of the Polish Academy of Science could be somewhat curbed in the near future. So if you like bundle it together, that you will see that in consequence, Poland's sort of semi-consolidated democracy will become an open, competitive, authoritarian regime where the competition is formally open, but very much uneven. So political playing field will be a lot more uneven, and it will be even harder for the opposition in the long run to succeed. Much like in Hungary, this is exactly what we've been witnessing in Hungary in the last 10 years.
The Freedom House Democracy Index came out several days ago and said that Poland was no longer a consolidated democracy. How is it the resonance of the study in Poland? How do people see it?
Well, given that the extremely high level of polarization within the society, of course, there were like different responses. But all those who are generally concerned and anxious about this kind of authoritarian system transformation of the government, of course, they have noticed it. I mean, they sort of it draws some attention. I'm not sure what sort of attention it has sort of have been drawing among those who are practically supporting the government, because they're in a markedly different social media bubble. They are watching maybe other news. They might be heavily dependent on state media, which is disseminating the narratives of the government and so on and so forth. But I think if we step back a bit and have a look at what is going on in this country, and if I may draw a little bit like sort of a parallel, or raise some similarities between Hungary and Poland, lots of people here in Poland are concerned that the country will simply undergo sort of an urbanization in the long run, especially if President Andrzej Duda will win the elections again. So Jarosław Kaczynski is a well-known, long-standing admirer of Viktor Orban. We all remember his infamous speech when he openly claimed that he hopes to have Budapest on the Vistula. And frankly speaking, I mean, taking into account Poland's downgrading international reputation, I think it is fair to say that Kaczynski at least partly succeeded by 2020. So, as you mentioned, rightly pointed out to this Freedom House Nation in Transit report, Poland is no longer a consolidated democracy. It's rapidly shifting towards authoritarian. And moreover, like despite the fact that Viktor Orban's country is furthest into autocracy within the EU, I think Poland's ranking has even fallen below Hungary, according to the Economist Intelligence New Democracy Index. A couple of months ago, it has been published. I think it is fair to say that the overhaul of the judicial system is indeed in the most advanced stage in Poland. And it is also true that this recently adopted Muslim law from last year, it is threatening the entire legal system of the European Union. I still think that European governments, having two-thirds majority, employed a lot broader system transforming strategy. So this is why Hungary is a lot further into autocracy. So while we have been witnessing a very progressive establishment of a one-party state in both countries, I think that Fidesz successfully really emptied out all democratic institutions of content that would somewhat check upon the executive power. And also this kind of system of national cooperation, it criminalized civil society, undermined academic freedom, deliberately weakened local municipalities, and most importantly, due to horizontal accountability, in Hungary there is a very strong centralized sort of legalized state corruption. So in contrast to that, in Poland, part of the checks and balances are still functioning quite well. And although Kaczynski would like to catch up with Orban, if the systemic attack on the Kurds succeeds, there is still a very vibrant and resilient civil society in Poland. So we've been seeing it in the last couple of years, how hundreds of thousands of people were demonstrating in the streets. And this is exactly why the Polish Ministry of Environment right now has started to work on a plan to disclose the financing of NGOs. This is brand new. It's a brand new idea. They came up with this. We know where the idea comes from. We have seen the same thing in Hungary, in Israel, in Russia, in different formats. But the name of the game is about sort of restricting civil society. In this plan, NGOs would be also obliged to state that they are being financed from abroad, and this is really similar, really, to what happened to Hungary. So we will see how it will evolve. But the thing is that the agenda is getting similar. There is still an independent body of commercial media, as I just mentioned. So the media market is quite diverse, both electronic and print media, but it could also change later on. What was occurring to me is that there is a lot more passionate and intense debate, political debate, and the political discourse somewhat prevails on Twitter much heavier in Poland than in Hungary. So people are not that much using Twitter. Or at least political discourse do not prevail there. And also, as I mentioned, universities are politically still free, so censorship is mainly self-imposed for the moment. It could also change, as I just mentioned, with regards to academia. But the most important contributing factor, I think, is that the constitutional design really matters. So due to this multi-level or multi-level governance system in Poland, the local governances are serving as a role of counterbalancing the central administration. So while Hungary is totally and 100% centralized, Poland is polycentric in this regard, and this kind of decentralization is one of the greatest achievements, I think, of the democratic transition. And whoever the next president is, no matter which party he's coming from, this is exactly the package that he will need to protect. He will need to protect this achievement, since PIS was trying to grab the power and trying to restrict local autonomies before, and there might be this kind of intentions later on if they can keep the presidential palace.
So you've just mentioned the Twitter sphere. Several days ago, I read about the boycotting of the state radio in Poland because of a song that certain Polish leaders did not like. Do you think this song could have an impact on the election?
I'm not sure I can tell you what exact impact it will have on the election outcomes, but I must say that it is really one of the hottest topics and really high on the top of the agenda and in the epicenter of the campaign right now, because it shed lights on censorship of public media. Exactly what happened in a nutshell is that last week this veteran musician Kazik Staszewski's song entitled "Your Pain is Better Than Mine" was announced as top #1 single in Polish radio and Polish public radio, and it was immediately removed from the top list because it was politically sensitive. It was about sort of complaining about the 10th anniversary of Smolensk disaster, where PIS were criticized, that they were participating despite the fact of the national lockdown. And in specifically, it depicts Kaczynski in a very negative way, who not only played a central role in these commemorative events, but he also visited his mother's grave despite, the cemetery being closed. So that's why this how the title reflects upon it, that your pain is better than mine. But yes, so long story short, this case has shed another light on the nature of public media, which has been entirely captured and controlled by PIS. So in Poland, just like in Hungary, the government captured the public media and transformed it into a so-called national media. But I think it's rather better to call a spade, and call it as a sort of a propaganda channel, which mainly disseminates narratives and conspiracy theories favored by the ruling party. And interestingly, in this regard, Rafał Trzaskowski's sort of opening when he announced his, running for presidency, he made a very combative start. I mean, he promised that if he's going to be elected, he would seek to replace the current public television, like TVP, with a new service, like openly bashing it, that it's a propaganda channel and something that is poisoning Poland's public life. So I guess it's going to stay with us for a while. And it's this move that it has been removed, it might have some sort of a backlash on the government.
Great. Thank you very much, Edith, for this very informative chat on the recent political events in Poland. We'll see how things are evolving and how the presidential election will take place, when it will take place, and what its consequences will be for the Polish politics and society. Once again, appreciate this interesting chat and wish you all the best to Warsaw.
Thanks a lot for having me. It was a privilege, and I would like to wish you good luck with the podcast.